I came across this video a while ago of why representation isn't the solution by Fif Badaki. I believe that's pronounced. I'm not entirely sure. Of course, the thumbnail definitely catches you, and so does the title. I wanted to take a look at it, and I realized as I did, and I listened to some of the things that he had discussed um, in his other videos covering the same similar topic. There's definitely merit in going over this. Hey everyone, my name's Christian Verstappen, and I have a lot to say about many things. Let's get into it.
Sounds like we're basically seeking to use this undue power for our own good, instead of addressing the root cause and stripping this tool of its power in the first place. Alright, so now that I've talked about how I personally feel about the ideal of representation in media and also acknowledged where I think the other side of this argument is coming from, I think the natural thing to do would be to try to offer a solution. It's one thing to complain about the current state of affairs, but I think it's more helpful for everybody to put forth solutions so that we can critique them and narrow them down to a single decisive step.
I 100% agree with that. Anybody that wants to just complain for the sake of complaining without offering any actionable steps on how to, excuse me, how to fix things and how to move forward, what are you doing? You're just shouting fire in a crowded room.
Being said, I'm not going to pretend like I know what that final step is. This is just going to be my opinion on what I think needs to be done in order to solve this controversial issue. But I do invite any good faith critiques of my ideas so that in working through them, we may eventually find a solution that would satisfy everybody who is affected by this problem. But with all that said, let's just get into it. So first of all, I think we need to identify specifically what the problem is. And from what I've seen, read, and heard, it seems like the problem is that the minority communities in this country believe that for far too long we have been represented in the media as archetypical, stereotypical caricatures of the types of people that actually exist within our community. And also that we haven't been given enough opportunities to be the leading figures in the more conventionally popular stories, often being relegated to background characters like the sidekick or the comedic relief. And as a result of this, the people within our communities who constantly see themselves represented in these ways start to believe that this is just our lot in life, never to be the one saving the world, or the one running the Fortune 500 company, or the romantic interest in a love story.
Maybe they're right. It's not really the brown girls from Jersey City who save the world.
The claim is that seeing ourselves constantly relegated to the side characters who never achieve the glory that the main characters achieve creates a negative feedback loop which discourages the people within these communities from ever even striving to achieve those heights. And so the push for representation is a push for these communities to see themselves as the heroes, the bosses, the love interests, etc. So that we can begin to understand that we are just as capable of achieving these heights as the heroes that we've typically seen on the big screen. And again, just as I said in my last video, on the surface, this solution does make some sense. If black characters in media are only shown to be rappers, athletes, and criminals, and as a result, the young black population that watches these movies start to believe that their only options in life are to either—
I realize I'm being very quiet here for two minutes 30 seconds so far. We'll get to it. So far he hasn't said anything that I disagree with. I know there's a point here that he gets to where I will have something to say in a minute here.
Either be a rapper, an athlete, or a criminal, then maybe creating a TV show where all the black characters are lawyers, doctors, engineers, and CEOs would communicate to them that they have plenty of other options. That makes sense, and I don't deny the logic of this solution. So why then do I disagree with the ideal of representation if it is such a sensible solution to a very real problem? And to answer that question, I need to ask a different question. Do you believe that it is the media's responsibility to teach us what we can or can't be in life? Do you believe that media should have the power to determine the limits of the human beings that engage with their stories? Personally, I don't believe that the media should have that power at all.
Okay, this is it. This is it right here. So it's not about whether or not the media should have that power. I agree that it shouldn't. But there are a lot of systems and such in place that shouldn't have a certain amount of power in our life that just do. We can't live in the world of just how we would like it to be, as far as, oh, this shouldn't affect us, that shouldn't, like, these things shouldn't matter, however you want to, any of that. Like, it doesn't matter how it should be, it matters how it is. And how it is the reality that it's not, to an extent, there is merit in the idea that if you see yourself represented a certain way, so to speak, you see people that look like you, act like you, whatever, represented in a certain way, it might encourage you to do things similar to those characters and make a positive change. There was this thing known as the Scully effect from the X-Files, I think it was. Yeah, the Scully effect, phenomenon where the number of women starting careers in typical STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, professions saw a notable increase following the airing of the X-Files in the 90s. Now, this is one aspect of it, and this is the aspect that people will tend to talk about with these kind of issues where, representation, because people can see themselves and blah, blah, blah. You'll also have people, and this guy did talk about it in his other videos discussing this matter too, which you're more than welcome to check out if you want. But in any case, the whole issue with this entire concept is that this is only looking at one side. See, it's not just about, do you feel like you can relate to these characters, and you can look at this and you can say, well, I've never had a problem relating to people that are different from my race. That's great. I haven't either. I've had plenty of instances where I relate more to a person of color or a woman or something, or a gay person, rather than somebody else who is a cis het straight white male. But one of the big things that gets glossed over in this conversation is the importance of representation, not just for yourself, but for other people. I think I've talked about this before. I'm not entirely sure, but I naturally have reddish brownish hair. I'm naturally very pale, and I am often referred to, or was growing up especially referred to, as a ginger. Now, while growing up, I looked up to characters like, say, Drake Bell from Drake and Josh, who did have a similar hair color and style to myself back then, which I very much modeled after him anyway, or we'll just look up John Stamos in his portrayal of Jesse Katsopoulos from Full House. Well, I looked up to characters like these and saw myself in characters like this. This is what the media portrayed gingers as. People, especially guys, white males with red hair. There was this meme, and I gotta be honest, I don't know if South Park was making fun of what someone did on YouTube, or if it was the other way around. The guy on YouTube did like a parody of it after the video. I don't know, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know. But what I do know is that this kind of concept, and it didn't help the fact that I was, a little bit heavy set at the time too, but this concept of this kind of character, this caricature more or less of a ginger, is something that I was very much saddled with for much of my life throughout middle school and high school. While this in no way compares to people who are discriminated racially and such, this is an experience that I can share in which I can relate to this matter. This idea that there were all these jokes constantly made about gingers are soulless, gingers are this. I was told that I was a bad ginger because I don't really have any freckles. You can probably tell even on my face. I have some like on my arms here and there, but nothing compared to what a typical ginger would actually be. So while I viewed myself as these kind of characters, we didn't have people like, whoops. We didn't have people. Come on, where's the? Oh, it's Riverdale. That's right. Yeah, we didn't have dudes with red hair who were conventionally attractive and were the cool guys, the main characters, even like this guy who played in the Riverdale Archie show, or Grant Grant Gustin, who played the Flash, or even Dylan O'Brien, who played well, okay, I know Dylan O'Brien and will always know him as Styles from Teen Wolf, but Dylan O'Brien, another guy who has, and of course, with different lighting and even different situations, sometimes his hair looks darker. Funnily enough, similar thing happened with Drake, where he had more reddish hair, but here, if we look up him with red hair. No, like, fine, ginger. Okay, maybe he doesn't have that red of hair. I thought he did. In any case, see, that's just another example. We didn't have people like that, or who's the guy? Star Wars. Is that what it's called? Yeah, we didn't have Cameron Monaghan and his portrayal of Cal, I think the guy's name is. I don't remember. I'm only tacitly familiar with Star Wars The Fallen Jedi. I will play it someday, but have not gotten around to it yet. But we didn't have characters like him. And when I first saw him, by the way, as, well, he wasn't called the Joker, but when I first saw him as Jerome in Gotham, if we do... I saw myself, not because he's some maniacal character, but like, I saw a dude that, when I would style my hair more like that, looked kind of like myself. I understood just a little bit, and have understood over time, this concept that, yes, representation is important. Because when the only it's not so much, though, about the representation of like, we have to have representation in general. It's more so, as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to have representation at all, it should be positive representation. The guy in this video, Thief, used earlier the examples of, let me find it here, like black people being depicted as like gangsters, and or gangstas if you want to get pedantic, being people who were always represented in media as criminals, or maybe athletes or rappers or something, but that's really about it. Aside from that, they didn't really get much representation in a lot of different ways. And the thing is, it's not so much about if they related with, say, the main character in something, regardless of if they were the same race. It's more so about what message does that representation send to other people. Again, partly because, not entirely, I won't blame it entirely on this, but the media does play a part in the fact that my type of person, a ginger, who was constantly depicted as this like goofy person, this like nerdy person, this loser kind of character, and was never depicted as like the main character or the hero or anything like that. Those kind of things play into how I was viewed by other people growing up. And so again, while it is a not anything on the same level as being discriminated by race and not feeling represented in that way and such, or being represented negatively, it is a way in which I can understand the matter, and a way that I hope I can get the issue across to people who understand it's not about race in and of itself, it's about just representation in general. If there's anything about you that is unique, and it is okay, here's another example. People with glasses. For the longest time, people with glasses were always depicted as these nerdy people and all these different things. So you had people in real life who would just like, you'd have women that wouldn't want to date guys with glasses. You'd have the typical nerd character being the ones with glasses, all these different things. Now, because of positive depiction of them in media, people who wear glasses are actually considered attractive. the appropriate depiction of people in media is extremely important, and more so the positive depiction is more so important rather than people just being represented at all. I would argue it would be better for these groups, for groups of people to not be represented at all rather than to be represented negatively. The best thing is to represent them positively, but what I'm saying is it does more harm to have negative representation than to have no representation at all. And I think that that's the point that even Fief is missing here, unfortunately. Though I do think he makes good points in general.
To teach us what we can or can't be in life. Do you believe that media should personally, I don't believe that the media should have that power at all. I don't think that power should rest with anybody but the individual. And so that is why, at its core, I disagree with the ideal of representation as a solution to these problems. Because it continues to place that power in the hands of the media. Power that, again, I don't think it should have. I think that the purpose of media is just to tell stories. And yes, we can and should take inspiration from these stories. I have repeatedly talked about the impact that stories like The Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones have had on me. These stories are partially responsible for communicating the ideals and principles that I place value in today. And I've made videos explaining specifically what each of these stories has taught me. Whether it was Game of Thrones teaching me the importance of empathy by making us, the viewers, root for the very person that we had spent 2.5 seasons hating, just by showing us the circumstances under which that character acted. Or whether it was The Lord of the Rings teaching me about the intoxicating allure of power and the dangers it presents if we aren't constantly vigilant against its temptations. But these stories never dictated to me what I could or could not be. They simply revealed to me the principles, convictions, and ideals that I now strive for. I believe that no matter the story, this is what is at the heart of it. The idea, the message, or the lesson that is trying to be conveyed. I believe that this is why we tell stories. I believe that this is their purpose. And I believe that we should allow stories to serve this purpose without bestowing upon them any extraneous privileges or powers, such as dictating to us what we can or can't achieve materially in our lives. When a story tells us what we can or can't be, then in my opinion, that is an indication that we have given the story too much power. And by focusing on representation to fix the aforementioned issues concerning our minority communities, we essentially ignore this reality and actually put more power into the hands of the media to dictate to us our potential in this life. We're essentially saying that we acknowledge that media already plays too big of a role in influencing people's minds about the behaviors and personalities of certain demographics. But in order to combat that influence, we're going to give this tool even more power, only now it'll be used in our favor. And to me, this argument just sounds like we're basically seeking to use this undue power for our own good, instead of addressing the root cause and stripping this tool of its power in the first place. Remember?
Okay. I think this comes to a fundamental misunderstanding of this whole concept with media and power and all this stuff in general. If power exists, if systems must exist in a way, then they should be for the benefit of people. We can argue all day long that, oh, it shouldn't be this way, it shouldn't be that way, yeah, whatever. The reality is, the world that you consume through media, be that fictional or otherwise, is just as real to many people as the world out. There are many people, I would say less so now, but there are many people, especially in like the rural South, for example, where their only real exposure to minorities, racial, sexual, anything, is media. Largely social media, especially nowadays, but that's it. And I can say that, at least as far as I know, there was a lot of that I experienced. I didn't really experience gay people growing up at all. It wasn't until things like How I Met Your Mother with Barney's brother, who was gay, and a gay black man at that I understood and came to see a representation, a positive one, I would say, of a gay person. I didn't even grow up in like the rural South. I live, and I grew up in a very purple area, and I still hold to the fact that this, especially this part of Florida, is purple, but it's, oh god, it's getting more red every day. Anyway, existential crisis later. My exposure to black people, aside from my one neighbor and like the 3 or 4 people in my school I knew who were black. They were probably like 20 or so, but out of a school of like over around 1,000 or more, or I don't know, there were whatever the typical amount is for a public high school. That's a very small amount. I didn't actually know anyone else who was black my own age until middle school. Like, I'm not even kidding. And again, I didn't grow up in a rural area. I knew my one neighbor, and until middle school, I didn't know anybody my own age. I didn't have any friends who were racial minorities. I think I had a friend who was some type of Native American. I'm not entirely sure on that though. But for the majority of, especially my childhood, it was all white. And my experience, my exposure to black people was through the TV shows that I grew up on. A lot of times the cartoons and the superhero shows like Cyborg and Teen Titans, who I loved, and I loved that show and that character and everything. Or Static Shock in that show. Or Family Matters. While I really loved Full House as I was growing up more, and that was kind of like what I wanted my life and my family to be. My exposure to like black people, I know criminally, I never saw much of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I know, but I saw a lot of Family Matters, and for the longest time, these things were my exposure to racial minorities. Again, I didn't know. I didn't even know gay. I mean, I knew like of gay people, kind of. I knew that they like existed. I knew that I was taught that I was supposed to, that they were sinners and stuff because I was growing up in the church and all that. But I didn't really see them until, again, the first example I can think of is How I Met Your Mother. Still to this day, one of my favorite shows, by the way. But that's a whole other thing. And I'll be doing a video on that at some point in the future too. But no, it's just, it's not about should this power exist. It's about this power does exist. What can we do about it to affect positive change rather than hurt people with this power? What can we do? Because, I mean, I don't know. I don't think that I would have thought bad of people who were different than me. I've always been pretty curious and open-minded in general, unless it was like, I was taught not to be. But again, for me, and a lot of people are this way. And I grew up in the 2000s. Oh, there was also Number 5 from Codename Kids Next Door. But like, that was what I knew. Those cartoon characters and Family Matters. Oh, and Tucker from Danny Phantom. So there were like a few. But like, though, that was what I knew as black people. I had no... I saw like an episode of Lil Romeo or something on Teen Nick. But like, again, until middle school, I didn't have exposure to real black people. I mean, again... Well, my own age. There was my neighbor, and I definitely didn't think anything bad of him. Neither did my parents. We all got along well and everything. And I went to their wedding. Not that I remember because I was so young. But they it is very important, and it can't be understated that the representation is important, not just so that you personally relate with them. Because I've heard people do this with, say, like Miles Morales Spider-Man, for example, where they say like, oh, well, I as a black person relate more to Peter Parker. Okay, cool, that's great. But like, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I relate. There are people, everybody hates Chris. That was another one. And that was around the time that I was going into middle school and was actually getting exposure to, But I related more to Chris than I did Greg. I mean, of course, he was the main character; he's the one you're supposed to relate to. But like all of these things, you have these moments, and again, you can say, "Oh, well, I don't have a problem relating to someone different from me." That's fine, but it's not about your internal perception of yourself. I mean, it is to an extent, but it's more so about how representation of people like you in some way affects how others will perceive you because of that media. So I really hope, I know, I feel like him and I both are just hammering down the same points, but I really want to get this through.
What Gandalf said in the Fellowship of the Ring when Frodo tried to give him the ring?
Understand, Frodo, I would use this ring from a desire to do good, but through me, it would wield a power too great and terrible to imagine.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I feel like
Wait, what did that say?
It would wield a power too great and terrible to imagine.
I know I'm a certified... Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I feel like we need to destroy this power and not try to use it for ourselves. Because when you don't address the root cause of an issue and you only attack the symptoms, you tend to do more harm than good, and you might actually end up exacerbating already existing issues while allowing the real problem to grow and fester. And
I agree with this, but the problem is the Lord of the Rings and anything else where you're destroying something at the source by literally physically destroying it, that's fine for something that's physical, like the ring in the Lord of the Rings. But in real life, when you have this systemic and cultural issue, you don't destroy it by just like blowing up a machine that controls all the data or something. You destroy it by changing the minds of people. And that's what the point of the positive representation is.
kind of touched on some
This is us destroying it.
of these exacerbated and also newly created problems in my previous videos. Like how the definition of representation is so loosely defined and there doesn't seem to be a definitive end goal where we can say we've achieved it. There's just a sentiment that more is better, even though percentage-wise, Hollywood already pretty much matches up with the real-world demographics, at least for black and white people. And yet the calls for more representation ensue. I also mentioned how representation might not actually solve the problem, seeing as that was also the rallying cry for ending police brutality. And yet, even though the police demographics almost directly match up with the general American population demographics, again, at least for black people, police brutality.
All right, I'm going to point out something here. This is getting on my nerves a little bit. Have you ever tried to search for something on Netflix or anything else? Comic books, video game characters, musical artists, anything. And you're trying to find specifically black people, Latin people, some other race that isn't white. It's very easy, because, and I did this, and I thought this and bought into this for a long time. When you are either not paying attention or you're so focused on only the white people that you notice when the minorities come in, oh, this is some like virtue signaling. And sometimes it is, and we'll get to that. Do you know how hard it is to actually find positive representation of people of color? I was the other day looking specifically for a show or movie, anything, that featured a black woman as the main character. I just wanted to watch something that featured a black woman. And I ended up watching the entire first season, at least, of She's Gotta Have It, which, by the way, and I'm talking about the Netflix version of it, by the way, absolutely incredible series. Why does it do this? I cannot recommend this series enough. It is so good. But while I had already found this and had added it to my list on Netflix and everything, I kind of had to go out of my way originally to find it and to think like, okay, if I want to watch, like, say, a sitcom that features a black woman as the lead, what am I gonna what am I going to find? How am I going to find that? How am I going to look for that? When I was getting into comics, I was really trying to get a bunch of different types of characters that I was into as I was expanding my horizons, especially with women that I found attractive. I've talked about this before briefly, but essentially, I used to, and this is a thing with representation too. Actually, yeah, you know what? No, this all relates. So, for the longest time, I thought that I was only attracted to, I'd say, white or white passing people. And I'm talking physically attracted as a romantic or sexual partner. Now, as I deconstructed this very recently, actually, largely with the help of my friend, who very much likes black women, especially. As I kind of deconstructed this with him, and I had a lot of like positive representation and things he would show me and recommend to me of, like, you're crazy. Of course, these women are beautiful, and yeah, they were. I realized I had to look at where did this bias come from. Which, by the way, I wasn't even aware that like it is a common thing for people to say black women are unattractive. I just thought it was a preference that I personally had. I didn't realize it was this whole like thing. And for me, by the way, it was a preference that I personally had. Now, I was able to change it, and preferences can change over time, but that's a topic for another day. I thought back to a point where I was told by my father growing up, don't ever marry a black woman. We were walking out of, I think we were walking out of a Walmart. I believe we were in a parking lot, and there was this mixed couple, black man, white woman. And he had some like thing of disgust in his voice and just said, don't ever marry a black woman. And I was like 9, 10 maybe. I internalized this, and I extrapolated it to ultimately mean don't marry, or hell, even allow yourself to be attracted to a woman who isn't white. I have deconstructed this. I've deconstructed many things within my life over the last couple of years, but this is the most recent, I'd say, my racial preferences, or rather racial exclusion. On a quick note, I do think preferences are valid. I think it's also good to kind of look at and figure out why you have your preferences, and if they can be challenged, if they can be changed. If it's better for you to change them, then by all means. If it isn't, whatever, But because of this, and my mind has like been open to finally allowing myself to view, women of color as attractive. When I was going through comics and adding comic characters and stuff, I would look up like all these different like female superheroes and stuff that I wanted to add to a giant list of comics that I'm going through. And anyway, so like kind of like a watch later list on something like Netflix or YouTube or something, just a list to say like I'm gonna get to this eventually. Anyway, so I was doing that, and I realized it was actually like, if you looked up like lists of, say, hottest women in comic books or something, most of those lists were white women. And while there's nothing wrong with that, it became where if I wanted to find specifically Black, Latina, Asian women to add to my list, and I did, I had to seek them out. And I did the same thing with trying to find a show to watch the other day. The point is, a lot of people look at this and they say, oh, they're shoving representation down our throat or anything like that. The reality is, the representation isn't there for the most part. Now, we'll get into it as we go into this video here, as far as race swapping characters go. We'll get into that and my thoughts on that in a moment here, but it is important to have positive representation of people of color in general. And the reality is that as much as, let's be real, conservatives want to cry about how it's everywhere, it really isn't. It's actually very difficult to find, even if you're looking for it. It's just that when you're not looking for it and or you don't want it, this sticks out a lot more. But if you're trying to find it, that's tough. You're trying to find something where the white characters is the main lead. You want to find hottest fictional characters, and you want to find, white women, white men, white anything. You can do that easy. Strongest, characters, most influential, any of this, right? White is the predominant thing in media, which is funny, by the way, because across the world, white isn't the minority. Like, white people are white isn't the majority. White is the minority across the world. But that's a whole other thing. Anyway, no, I wanted to point that out because people get all up in arms about this, where they're like, oh, they're putting black characters in my thing. They're putting these. It's all virtue signal. And again, some of it is. We'll get to that. But it's just, it's it's more nuanced than a lot of people want to give credit for.
Brutality is still rampant, specifically in black communities. And so I think we justifiably have to question whether...
Oh yeah, that thing real quick on police brutality. Again, just like the media thing, it's systemic issues. Having black cops in the police force is not going to prevent... They're not going to be like, oh, well, I'm not going to over-police that neighborhood because it's primarily black, and I see what you're having me do. No, they're going to be like, yes, Sergeant, I'll do my job, because it's like, as an employee, which is what cops are to their sergeants, you have to do your job. Like, that's just how any, yeah.
Is still rampant.
That's why they are issues that need to be addressed systemically. And unfortunately, as cool as the narrative, look, I love things like the show Gotham, for example, where you have Jim Gordon come in and he's like, I'm going to make a difference. In reality, just being the one good cop in a slew of corrupt cops, especially when the system itself is corrupt, is not going to make a change. Be the change you want to see in the world. That's a very good thing to live by. But when we're dealing with systemic issues like police brutality, you alone are not going to do anything.
Specifically in black communities. And so I think we justifiably have to question whether representation is really an adequate solution to the problem. There's also the issue of creating stories and characters specifically for individual groups and demographics, and how that inherently excludes everybody who doesn't fall into your target audience and discourages them from engaging with your story, resulting in...
So, I get what he's saying, but here's what I'm going to say. I don't think if you take something like, we'll go back to She's Gotta Have It, or Family Matters, or Everybody Hates Chris, or any of these things where black people are the primary focus, for example, or Miss Marvel, where they showed off a lot of culture from, I'm going to butcher this, some kind of Islam, if I am getting that correct. I don't remember, I apologize. But in any case, what you are doing is you are introducing people like myself who would otherwise be unfamiliar with that stuff. You're introducing us to a whole new world, a whole new culture, a whole new type of people. And if you go into it with an open mind and you look at this as, yes, these are stories, these are people, this is just like learning about any other fantastical world and characters in it, except this is real, that's amazing. Like, I never once, maybe some lingo here and there when I was watching She's Gotta Have It lately, some of the things were like, okay, that's clearly like, very, black slang, for lack of a better thing to call it. But that doesn't mean it like put me off or was distasteful or anything. It's just, okay, this is just a different dialect than I'm used to. Different isn't bad, and I think most people, provided they're exposed to it in the right way, not being preached at, we'll get to that, but provided they're exposed to it in the right way, I think most people are very willing and wanting to experience and explore new things. I think that there's a very healthy curiosity that many people naturally have, and unfortunately for a lot of people it kind of gets stamped out of them. But yeah.
In those stories flopping or getting canceled because they didn't have enough support. And lastly,
all I can say about this, and you know what, actually here, this is an example.
Resulting in...
So I don't know anything about Batwoman season 4, but I can tell you, by the way, a black Batwoman was not the issue with Batwoman. The issue with the Batwoman TV series was the preaching. This right here in the trailer, this turned myself and a ton of people off of it, like, immediately. So, to give context, you have the character, is it Cassandra Cain? Which one is, Kate Kane, my apologies. Kate Kane. Are these the actors and actresses? I guess they must be. Yeah, Stephen Amell, yeah. Anyway, you had Kate Kane, a Batwoman, who is lesbian, and okay, that's all well and good. The premise of the story is essentially that Batman has left Gotham for some reason, and Batwoman comes along to fix stuff. Now, if I remember correctly, well, in the comics, Batwoman was actually introduced in the New 52, which is a whole mess that I'm not going to get into right now. But in any case, the issue with the Batwoman TV series was not a black Batwoman. The issue was, and maybe V and Fuso has something to say about it. I don't really like their content. Why Batwoman flopped. Let's see. This was the issue right here. This kind of...
The suit is literal perfection.
So we have this moment where they showed in the trailer where Kate is exploring the Bat Cave, all this good stuff, and we have this.
I need you to fix his suit.
The suit is literal perfection.
It will be. When it fits a woman.
Now, to be charitable about that line, it will be when it fits a woman. First of all, it should have just been it will be when you make it fit me or when it fits me or something like that. That would have been better. Because what a lot of people, myself included, took that to mean is she's just, I don't know, it just feels very preachy. It feels like, it feels like that very preachy, woke scoldy type of feminism and not really gender equality, but almost a flipping of the scripts kind of thing. And it's very, very cringy. And we'll get to this more later here. I don't know what the hell just happened to the... We'll get to the virtue signal-y stuff in a bit, because the preachiness, the virtue signal stuff, that is what is an issue. We'll get to this more in a bit, but my answer to this kind of thing is ultimately to say, just do the thing, do the representation, and don't make a big deal about it. But we'll get to it.
In those stories flopping or getting canceled because they didn't have enough support. And lastly, there's the hypocrisy of the representation ideal. Because if we get so up in arms about whitewashing, which, just to be clear, I think is justifiable, I think we should be upset with that. But that means that we can't turn the other cheek when we witness blackwashing.
I agree with this. Put simply, I fucking hate double standards. Like, I don't care. I know some people will justify it and all kind of I don't give a fuck. Rules for me, not for thee is super fucking cringe. It does not lead to positive anything at the end of the day. It's fucking bullshit. My take on this, just real quick, and we'll get into it as the video continues here. This is fine. This is fine. And so is this. These are both fine. That's my take, all right? We'll get to it in a bit here, but my take is race swapping, gender swapping, whatever the hell you want to do, I don't give a fuck. These are things of fiction. If we're talking about, what do you call it? Things where you have to do, things where the race of a character actually matters, or their sexuality matters, or whatever, cool. But like, gender swapping, race swapping, sexuality, I don't give a whatever. Whatever. It's fine. It's let people make art the way they want to make art. It's whatever. It's fine.
One of the more prominent examples of this occurred in the movie Doctor Strange, where the character of the Ancient One, who is depicted as an Asian man in the comics, was substituted for Tilda Swinton, a white woman. There was outrage at this casting choice, which, in principle, I can understand. However, in the same movie, the character of Baron Mordo, who is a white man in the comics, was given to Chiwetel Ejiofor, a Nigerian man. And it was radio silence from the fans because the person being swapped was a white man and the person taking his place was black. And so this creates a rules for thee but not for me environment, and we're seeing the effects of that environment manifest today. When Ariel from The Little Mermaid was race swapped, everybody was quick to defend this decision, declaring that since Ariel's race plays no important role in the story, she can be played by literally anybody from any ethnicity, regardless of the fact that she was originally portrayed as a white teenage girl. But when Scarlett Johansson was given the role of Motoko Kusanagi in the live-action remake of Ghost in the Shell, there was a large public outcry to have that character portrayed by an Asian actress, as the source material depicted her, even though Motoko's race is of no importance to the story. And it's sad because as a huge fan of Ghost in the Shell, it is literally one of my top 10 favorite movies and TV shows of all time. Okay,
this is a me thing, 100%. I am very colorblind when it comes to animated characters. I'm going to give you an example here. I literally thought, I am not kidding, for the longest time until a friend pointed this out to me. I thought, do you want to use this one? I mean, this is fan art. This is fan art too. Wait, no, this is legit. I think. Whatever. I thought that all of these characters in Avatar: The Last Airbender were just different shades of white. When I look at anime, even if it's something like My Hero Academia, to me, all of these people are white. They're just different shades of white. I know. But unless it's a character like, part of it is the voice actor too. But unless it's a character who, looks, I would say obviously, not really, I don't know. No, that's not even the right way to phrase it. I don't know. Because you could argue that all of these look obviously Asian or whatever other races they might be. But yeah, I don't know. I even thought that I thought these guys were just tan. I thought they were just like really tan. I thought oh god, Aladdin. I'm not kidding. I literally thought when I was a kid that like Aladdin and characters, I thought they were just like super tan. I just thought they were like, I thought everybody was, I thought everybody was different, different shades of white. And there are many things to be said about this. For one, to me, apparently it's this way to a lot of people. To me, the default is white because that's what I am. I imagine people, unless I'm told otherwise, I imagine them as being something similar to me. I always thought that people just envisioned other people and like the default was whatever they were. I thought that was the default, racially speaking. Come to find out, no, the reason I have that default is not just because, maybe it's at least partly because I'm white, but it's because of representation. Because when I think about it, even though it was white, when I was ginger, for example, it wasn't white gingers I imagined. It was white dudes with dark hair. That was like what because I grew up on all these like cartoons and movies and stuff. It was white with brown hair was like the default, not even black hair, but brown hair. Yeah, I don't know. So there's my point with all this is there's absolutely a case to be made for how all of this representation works and how just how it works, how it needs to be done, all that good stuff. But again, you don't be cringy and preachy about this stuff. You just do it, and we'll get to it.
Watch that TV show with subtitles. All right, if you know, you know. Literally.
Yeah. Real quick, by the way, hot take with anime. Everyone's gonna hate me, especially when it comes to anime. Dubs over subs. I don't give a fuck. If I want to read a book, I'm going to read a book. If I want to watch a movie or a TV show, I'm going to watch a movie or a TV show. Maybe it's because I'm kind of a slow reader. I read at the pace that I imagine people talking. But when I'm reading, I can't pay attention to what's going on screen. I can't. If I want to read, I'm going to read like a comic book or an article or, well, I don't read actual books. So I only read like comic books and articles these days. So yeah, take that as you will.
Really one of the
comments. Of course I read comments online and shit.
Hardest TV shows I've ever had to read in my entire life. But anyway, because I was such a huge fan, I actually agreed with the outcry, but for very different reasons, obviously. The reality is that Motoko's Asianness is completely irrelevant to the story, seeing
the only way you could say that it matters, by the way, is their name. But especially, and I've never seen Ghost in the Shell, so I don't know this for a fact, but I believe it's like super far in the future. It's like a cyberpunk. Oh, by the way, the Netflix Cyberpunk series was amazing. But anyway, no, it's you. How do I phrase this? You Never mind. I lost my train of thought.
as her character's central conflict deals with.
Oh, right. You could even say then that like, okay, well, but she could have that name because like it's just a cool name to have now. I mean, we have people that have all kind of different races of names now. Hell, names like Daniel, David, Benjamin, maybe not Benjamin, but Daniel, David, Joseph. These are names that are like from the Bible and shit, and they weren't white, despite what different depictions of people like Jesus will show. By the way, race swapping has always been around. They literally race swap Jesus all the time. So, yeah.
The fact that she is, in a sense, disconnected from humanity since her entire body is cybernetic and she sees herself only as a consciousness. And so her ethnicity is so far removed from the story. And so if people defend Ariel's race swapping but condemn Motoko, then the fact is that they're just using that power for themselves. And what they're really saying is that white people can't race swap, but minorities can't. And that, in essence, is the definition of hypocrisy. But again, these are just a few examples of how representation exacerbates and creates problems. And what all of this leads to is takes like this.
This message is to all our would-be accomplices and white allies. This message is to all the white people who have BLM in their bio. If you really want to prove to black people that you love us and you care about us and you are down for the cause, do not go see that movie opening weekend. You buy your ticket, you give it to a black person or a black family who can't afford to go. And then you go sit at that theater in front of the doors. You make sure that every black person in that theater can enjoy that movie in peace. You make sure that you use your body to block us from anybody who would be coming in that theater to do us harm. That is your job. You can go see it on another weekend. Go see it on the second or third weekend. But the first weekend, that's for us. To do anything other than this is anti-black.
Okay. Just real quick, Identity politics, virtue signaling, so much cringe shit that turns people off from the left and progressivism, and so much shit that the right loves to use to say, oh, look, this is how these progressive people are. No. Most people were not being like this woman. The important thing to know about this instance is that while it's super fucking cringe, she is a minority in her stance on this matter. Most people, black or otherwise, were not putting forth this narrative of like, oh, white people shouldn't see this movie because it's not for them. First of all media basically is in a way, or at least in my opinion, should be for everybody. You know, like there's nothing where it's like, oh, it's not for you. It's like, well, I mean, it's for anybody that wants to and can see it. So, I mean, it kind of is for me. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to relate to it personally, or it's going to connect with you, or you were the target audience, but you could still enjoy it. And, something like this, it really just feels like it is a type of, well, I mean, again, it's super virtue signaling. And they were talking about the second Black Panther movie. Let me find it. What was that called again? Wakanda Forever? Yeah, Wakanda Forever. Whoops, come on. Oh, well, whatever. Black Panther 2. I still have yet to see this movie, by the way. I will get to it. I will get to it. But it looks really good. I've heard a lot of really good things about it. But yeah, to say like, oh, this movie isn't for you. This movie, wait, it's on Disney Plus. Oh, I have no excuse then. In any case, but to look at this and to say, oh, this isn't for you because what, your race isn't in the movie or is in it very little or what, like that's no. Yeah, it's just super cringe, it's super virtue signaling, and all it does is perpetuate the issues and embolden it does. It emboldens the right because they look at people like this and they say, this is how these people are, this is what they want, this is blah, 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 blah. And no, this was not a big movement, a big thing. You didn't have some hashtag stay out whiteys or any shit like that.
Essentially, we've come to the point where we've decided that segregation is actually desirable as long as it favors us, and that white people should be willing to sacrifice their time and money in order to serve our interest, with them getting nothing in return. And unless you genuinely believe that the sins of the father should be revisited upon the son, then you can't support this ideal, because it's not the white people of today who enslaved our ancestors and committed mass genocide. These are just regular people trying to survive just like us, and they have no obligation to answer for the crimes of people they never knew and likely don't even agree with ideologically. In any case, this is where I believe the ideal of representation, if left unchecked, will lead us to a...
This is true. However, while the sins of the father thing is absolute bullshit, I almost feel like his phrasing of that could unfortunately be used to argue against reparations. Basically, without getting into too much detail about it, because quite frankly, it's not something that I'm super well versed on. But as I understand it, the idea of reparations is essentially to say there has been large economic and otherwise, but especially economic inequality in minority groups, especially black people, for, I want to say decades, but probably longer, a really, really long time. The idea is to essentially say, we want to make things right now by basically giving black people as a group, for example, things that they should have already had, access to things financially and otherwise, in a way to bridge the gap, so to speak. It's similar when you have any other kind of welfare program like this, where essentially you're saying like, well, this isn't to like give a leg up per se. I mean, it is, but it's to bridge the gap. It's not to like make them like better or anything. It is a positive thing and something that I do believe in and support. But I just want to clear that up because I feel like that sins of the father argument can be used to against reparations.
a resegregated world where the power of our past oppressors is now in our hands. Instead of dismantling this power, we've just taken it and weaponized it in our favor. And anybody who calls out this hypocrisy is labeled as anti-black or racist.
Wait, the racist backlash to The Little Mermaid and Lord of the Rings is exhausting and extremely predictable. Hey, look, it's a good picture.
Misogynist, sexist.
Wait.
Anybody who calls out this hypocrisy is labeled as anti.
Okay, I've talked about this before. We're gonna go back to let me get rid of these. Whoops. I've mentioned this before, but how they kept using this image of the actress where, yeah, this one, where her eyes, they look kind of like they're bugging out a little bit. And it literally is just for like one frame, because the actual actress looks perfectly fine. In other shots, she looks fine even as Ariel, but yeah, right, so let's, okay, this, I mean, this is really good. Why didn't they go with this kind of thing for the, whatever. In any case, no, let's go to, oops, if I could spell. Okay, here's the issue. I've talked about this before, but hey, that's how it goes, right? Okay, I'm going to put it this way. One of the things that I really like about modern technology and modern gaming, especially on PC, is that people can create mods and do things like make characters look, sound, or sometimes even play different than they were originally intended to. I think that's perfectly fine. And if somebody wants to mod a game to make a character look, sound, or play differently, that's fine. Even if you want to take a character and change their ethnicity or their hair color or their eye color or anything about them, I think that's fine in and of itself. And I don't have an issue with people doing that kind of thing for, say, a movie. The issue is when you, this isn't the one. Ah, this is it. Okay. The issue is when you have it like this. He fixed The Little Mermaid. The whole point being that what was wrong with her before? Well, she was black. How was it fixed? Well, now she's white. It's fixed, isn't it better? By the way, no, it's not fixed. Still has the eye issue. In fact, it actually looks worse here. I really wish they used a better frame. Everyone was using this frame, and I don't know. I almost feel like it was intentional, like they wanted to use that to make a whatever. Anyway, that's not the point. So, by the way, this one looks better than this one. But the issue is not with this kind of thing existing. The issue is this mindset right here fixed The Little Mermaid because, you know, and turned the woke actor into a ginger white girl. Oh, by the way, she's not ginger, she's a redhead. Again, being a natural ginger, I know the difference. I've been told the difference. Ginger is closer to orange, redhead is closer to red, you know, yeah. Anyway, not the point. I don't have a problem with this kind of thing in and of itself existing and being a possibility for people to do. I think if people want to be able to remake a movie, a TV, whatever they want to make, a piece of media as they see fit, they want to edit, they want to do whatever, by all means, you know, make modding for movies and stuff, I'm fine with that. Okay, cool. But you didn't fix anything. You just, you changed it. You can say, oh, here's this version that I made that's different. That's fine. But the issue is when you hyperfixate on this is fixed, instead of being woke, which just means black, now she's white like she's supposed to be. Like, that's, you know, it's gross.
anti-black or racist, misogynist, sexist, etc. And this is why I think representation fails as a solution and only serves to create more problems than it solves. Basically, I believe that fighting for more representation is akin to putting a band-aid on an open wound while we die from internal bleeding. It just continues to...
And I would argue that representation is not the band-aid, but it is the cauterization process, you could say, of closing that wound and preventing it from festering.
feed the beast that is media and exacerbates the already existing problem of media's undue influence on our lives. And more importantly, it simply doesn't address the root cause of the problem, which is, in my opinion, the myriad of socioeconomic policies that continue to keep minority groups isolated and trapped in poverty, resulting in these communities being forced to resort to certain behaviors just to survive or make it out. In my opinion, that is the internal bleeding that needs to be addressed here. It doesn't
He's correct. But that's not the point of this video.
matter if a young black boy living in the inner city sees a TV show about doctors where the lead is a black man and decides to become a doctor himself if he doesn't have access to the tools that would allow him to achieve that dream in the first place.
But if that lead doctor is seen by other people, especially white people who already have the power to, say, give him the ability, the schooling, the anything to be a doctor, then that representation is good and important. And that's why it matters. That's why it's important. There have been studies on this where people with, say, black sounding names are less likely to get callbacks on applications than people with white sounding names. Positive representation is one of the myriad of things that could go toward resolving that type of issue.
It doesn't matter that he's decided to be a doctor if his school doesn't have the adequate resources to bolster his education, if his community is riddled with crime, if he doesn't have access to healthy food because minority communities don't typically have access to affordable organic grocery stores, if his family can't even afford higher education, etc. These are the things that need to be addressed, and I believe that once they are, then our communities won't need to look to media to tell us what we can or can't achieve, because those paths would have already been opened up for us, and we would already have members within our communities who have reached those heights. We would know that black people can be doctors, lawyers, engineers, and CEOs because our family members and our neighbors already hold those titles, not because we saw it on a TV show. And so this is, in my opinion, where our focus should lie. The socioeconomic restructuring of society that will open up the paths towards success for everybody within the society. And so this is why I know that my solution is unpopular, because this is a slow process that has been in the works since the abolishment of slavery. And
I do agree that progress does take time, and unfortunately we can't just make change happen overnight, although it'd be great if we could. But I disagree with this mindset that's almost, we should only do things at the political level and shouldn't worry about anything at the cultural level, because each feed into each other.
even though
To think otherwise is just ignorant.
great strides have been taken, there is still a seemingly insurmountable amount of distance to travel. Nevertheless, I do believe that this is the proper solution, because it puts media in its place in terms of the inordinate amount of power we give it, while also addressing the myriad of other issues within our society, without resorting to hypocrisy or untenable solutions that only serve to exacerbate current issues. I do concede, however, that in the meantime, there absolutely should be more stories told about minority populations across the globe. I mentioned this in my first video about representation, but diversifying the types of stories being told will only benefit everybody involved in the storytelling industry, giving previously disregarded groups the opportunity to be the leaders of these tales while telling stories that convey different ideals, principles, and messages from what we've seen before, allowing us to find new inspiration in a multitude of characters from all across the globe. And by doing this, by focusing on the integrity and the diversity of the story and not of the characters, we will inherently create an environment where stories featuring a vast array of characters from various ethnic backgrounds can appeal to all demographics.
I agree with this. I do agree that we should see a focus on and a representation of things like, say, African folklore, Asian folklore, any kind of, folklore and different stories and all. Like, I think that is cool. And I do think that if we were to have those things done, and especially if, say, they take place in Africa, for example, or, Asia or wherever, that you have the appropriate people, look like that, because if that's where they're supposed to be from and where it takes place, like, that is different than, say, here's Ariel in modern times, and she's black. Like, okay, cool. That's all right. Whatever. My okay. My solution to all this, I think it's a lot simpler than some people make it out to be. Really, what it comes down to at the end of the day is the positive representation is important, and the virtue signally cringy bullshit turns everybody off. So don't do that. Do the representation, do the positive representation, but don't do it cringy. Don't virtue signal about it. Don't go on these media campaigns about how, oh, we're so brave for having a black person or a gay person or a trans person or I don't know if disabled would be the right word, because not necessarily disabled, but not able-bodied. I don't know what the right, you know what I mean though. We're so brave for having this person. Like, no, don't do that. Put them in the show, put them in the movie, put them in the video game, and then and represent them positively. And then, if you have conservatives freaking out, like the Quartering and people like that, and news outlets and all this, you turn to them and you say, what's your problem? Like, they ask, oh, you made them gay for a political statement. No, it just seemed like it fit the character. What are you talking about? I wrote the character and it seemed, oh yeah, they're gay. They would have a boyfriend, or oh, they're gay, they would have a girlfriend. Like, okay. Or hey, they're not really into relationships at all. They're ace, or they're arrow, or they're arrow ace, or whatever, right? You do the things without the virtue signaling. I'll give you some really good examples of this. First of all, the way they did it for the Obi-Wan TV series, not Black, I meant Backlash. Oh, Reva, that's her name. Yeah. So, when this character, Reva, was introduced in, I believe Moses Ingram is her name, and she was playing this character, a lot of people freaked out because she's black. And you know how they responded? You know how she specifically responded? This is a fictional sci-fi world full of all these aliens and shit. Why does it matter if there's a black person? How is that so unrealistic when there's all these aliens and different, like, that's how you do this. That is how you do this. You clap back at them when they spit their bullshit. You don't need to go on this, oh, we're making this a woman, we're making this a woman. No. You do the thing, and when they get mad at you for it, you say, what the fuck is your problem, dude? What, you have an issue? Is it because she's black? No. Is it because she's a woman? No. Is it because she's a black woman? No. Then what's your problem with her? Well, yeah, exactly. I'll give you another example. This is an example of positive representation for a non-able-bodied person. I'm not sure what the right terminology for that is, but they are a disabled person. Stick with me here. Bentley the Turtle from the Sly Cooper series. I said stay with me. Please do. I have a point. You already saw the pictures, probably. Bentley is a character, a part of the Sly Cooper series. And there is a moment at the end of Sly Cooper 2, spoilers for a almost 20-year-old game now. It came out in 2004, almost 20-year-old game. Spoilers for a 19-year-old video game. But Bentley has a moment in which at the end of the game, he gets crushed and he loses the ability to walk. What does he do in the next game? He comes out with a badass wheelchair that doubles as a rocket, a hovering technology. It's got these little claw things on it, Doc Ock style, where he can use it to, they're thieves, so he can use it to pickpocket and do different things like that. He can't use his legs, but he used his brain power to make this little mech wheelchair, and it's fucking awesome. And you know what that is? That is an example of positive representation. But you know what they never did in the game? They did do a few moments. This is in Sly 3. There was a whole arc where the character Murray felt very down on himself and held himself responsible for Bentley being in that situation. But Bentley himself never had this moment where he was like, oh, I can't do anything, blah, blah, blah. And no one ever had this moment where it was just like wink to the camera or anything, where it was like, see, we're doing positive representation here with a person in a wheelchair. They just did it. That's the point. You don't virtue signal. You don't preach. You just do it. And then, when and if you have the freaks come out and be like, oh, why are they this? Why, this is a political statement. You turn around and say, what's political about it? This is just how I wanted to represent the character. Well, what's your problem? You get it? Because at the end of the day, all of this, ethnic minorities, abled minorities, sexual minorities, all of that are just people like anybody else. At the end of the day, it shouldn't be weird to turn on the TV and see a black person as the main character, see a gay person as the main character, a trans person, whatever the case, right? It shouldn't be weird. So don't make it weird. Don't make it a big deal, because it shouldn't be a big deal. You just do the representation. Then when the freaks come out of the woodwork, you say, what's your problem? Why do you think it has to be this big, like, agenda thing? It's not. It's, what's your deal? Why do you think this is so weird? Then they have to explain themselves, and it's not going to look good when they do. Meanwhile, you have all these people that are seeing that positive representation, and they're seeing how cool it is. Because they're not being preached to. They're being entertained. And they're getting that positive representation along the way.
You could have a world where young American white children look up to Chinese, Indian, or Native American heroes from folklore. You know, like they already did.
Yes. Okay. I agree with this. Go on.
Which resulted from focusing on the integrity and diversity of the story and not necessarily of the character. And
just to be clear, by the way, I knew that Mulan was Asian. Listen, when I was growing up, we still called Native Americans Indians. I was incorrectly taught that they were called they were Indians. It's funny because I kind of came to the conclusion on my own growing up, learning about like actual Indians, like the country India and people who are in. I was like, well, wait, how are they Indians if these guys were Indians? And then eventually I learned that, oh, they're not. We just fucked up. Like, you know what I mean? But no, I legitimately thought just like a different shade of white. I'm not even kidding. I don't know if that shows here. I literally thought that like Pocahontas was like just a shade of white. I stand by we're all shades of orange, by the way. I stand by that.
Focusing on the integrity and diversity of the story and not necessarily of the character. And we could facilitate this by not inherently excluding them from the process by declaring that these stories and these characters aren't for them, like we used to do. In fact, this environment would almost explicitly be created in order to say yes to all of you who aren't of the demographic featured in this movie. This is still for you, because these characters are heroes and idols irrespective of the fact that they don't look like you, and you should view them as such and try to imbue their strength strengths into your own being while avoiding their weaknesses. That is the environment that I feel we should be striving for. And so through this solution, I think we find a happy medium. We create an environment where all minorities have more opportunities to star and lead these stories while also focusing on the real cause of the issue in the first place. And we do it all without resorting to hypocritical ideals that only serve to exacerbate the divide between the various tribes of humanity. But in any case, I think that's going to be it for this one. If you made it this far, thank you so much.
Yeah. So, for the most part, I do agree with what he had to say. I think that, in all honesty, he just kind of missed the point, or at least didn't address the point of representation for how it impacts how other people view those groups of people. But I do agree that if race swapping is going to be okay for one group, then it's going to be okay for everybody. You know, I used to be really against it, and it wasn't until it was actually Zoe Kravitz as Batwoman, and also going through and seeing how often Catwoman has been depicted as black or some shade of brown even, that actually like really kind of woke me up to the idea that, oh yeah, this isn't anything new. But you know, I mean, I was very against this stuff for a long time, but through more and more, you know, exposure to this, I realized, like, yeah, I really don't have an issue with race swapping in general. And especially, and I always thought this in general, especially when it comes to cosplay. But like, look, if an Asian or white person wants to cosplay, especially cosplay or dress up as Halloween or something, as say like Cyborg from Teen Titans, or hell, even if you have like a cis dude that wanted to be like Starfire or Raven, fucking go for it. You know, you do that. You embrace that character. That's like, you know, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're trans or they think they're, you know, they think they're black or anything. Like, fucking whatever. You know, whatever. It doesn't matter. I think the whole point is that at the end of the day, race is one of those things where, like, while they're like, yes, there is differentiation on like skin color and stuff like that, the concept of race is a social construct, and one that really doesn't need to exist. It does. But at the end of the day, we're all just the human race. We're all just people. Again, we're all different shades of orange. And yeah, just, you know, I say let people live, let people, be who they want to be. And if they want to race swap or whatever, gender swap anything for a piece of fiction, fine. Especially if it's something that's super old, like, okay, you want to talk about people getting up in arms about Little Mermaid. Like, that was a story written hundreds of years ago, originally by, I wanted to say Hans Zimmer, but that wasn't it. It was that something Christensen or something. I think the same guy that did, whatever, it doesn't matter. So many of these like fairy tales and folklores and stuff are like things that existed so long ago. And I would even say, if you wanted to take something that was based on Asian or African or any of that kind of folklore, and you wanted to adapt that and put that in, say, modern America or any other country, yeah, you could race swap those characters too. If you're going to keep it in what it was originally from, I don't think you necessarily should. I don't think you should at that rate. But, you know, if you're going to look at, like, I don't know, it shouldn't matter. Like, it just really shouldn't. Again, I do agree very much that the rules for me, not for thee. I hate hypocrisy in general. I try my best to not be hypocritical, and I hate when other people are as well. So if there's one thing I can't stand more than anything, it's probably hypocrisy. So yeah, no, I do think that at the end of the day, I think race swapping is fine, no matter what the race is. I don't buy into this, like, oh, it's okay to race swap white people but not minorities. Like, whatever, race swap, gender swap, sexuality, I don't give a fuck, whatever. If they're fictional characters, you know, if they're real, of course, you know, do justice and try to depict them as they actually were in the real world. That race swapping is like really cringe and bad, but no, just just let people make what they want to make. And again, don't virtue signal about it. Just do the thing. And when the conservatives come out and they're like, oh, this is a political thing, just be like, what are you talking about? This is just a thing. Get over it. So, yep, that's all I have to say for this. As always, these are just my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Follow me on social media for more. Subscribe and ring the bell to stay up to date. Leave a like if you like. And if not, I hope you find something to do like. Later, guys. Peace and love.